Om Devaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiv Narottam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiriye Nashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So continuing with the discussion on Prabhupada Lilamrita by Sasrup Das Goswami, Chapter 39, Prabhupada is in Mayapur. Prabhupada wished his godbrothers had taken a different point of view. He wished they had not minded his being called Prabhupada by his disciples. He was also sorry that some of his godbrothers couldn't sincerely praise his work. If Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was working successfully through him, why should they be disturbed? Why not accept his work and be happy that the mission of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was being spread effectively? They should see it as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's work, the work of their own spiritual master. It was also their work, their responsibility, and they should recognize that through Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Maharaj, it was being wonderfully done. Through Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, it was being wonderfully done. At the ceremony, they had praised his work. So if they didn't mind praising him, then why not admit that for hundreds of Westerners whom he had saved from hell, he was Prabhupada, that singular, pure devotee whom they always thought of as seated at the lotus feet of Krishna. So yes, Prabhupada had this issues with some of his godbrothers. But this is not something that we have to see. We have to see in the sense that we have to give respect to all his godbrothers equally. It's between godbrothers, whatever happens, it is between them. So we cannot have our vision changed in this way. In terms of authorized books produced and distributed, numbers of devotees initiated and engaged in devotional service, and numbers of temples opened, no one could compare. Of course, in one sense, all of Prabhupada's godbrothers were equally praiseworthy as long as they followed the basic instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, chanted Hare Krishna, and avoided sinful life. But if analysis or criticism was to be made with such scrutiny, then let the preaching records be scrutinized. Who above all was extending the mercy of Lord Nityananda and making such tremendous gains on behalf of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, gains that had previously seemed impossible. According to Chaitanya Charitamrita, if a preacher could spread the chanting of Hare Krishna, then he must be accepted as empowered by God. So this is Krishna Shakti Vina Nahi Paravartan. Simple as that. Prabhupada was certainly empowered, yet he conducted himself very humbly, with no assistance from others. He had repeatedly invited his godbrothers to join him in the West and take their places beside him as preachers in the Krishna consciousness movement. Why had they not come forward to assist him in the spiritual master's mission instead of complaining about him, the one godbrother who was carrying out Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's mission? So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Chaitanya Charitamrita it is said, no? Bharat, one of my Senapati Bhaktas, Chaitanya Mangal says, and Mahaprabhu said, all over Prithvita Yat, Achayat, Nagaradigram. So everywhere it will happen, but obviously it was Prabhupada only who did that. So this is what his point was, that why are they complaining? Why are they criticizing instead of joining him in this preaching mission? It was not the place of Prabhupada's disciples to criticize, however, and he had sternly warned them that they had no position to do so. They should treat his godbrothers as disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and therefore as on the level of their own spiritual master. Nevertheless, Prabhupada's disciples became sorry to see this lack of respect for their spiritual master. They could be humble and not protest, but how could they be affectionate towards persons who criticize a spiritual master and his Krishna consciousness movement? So, when we start talking to devotees outside ISKCON, and it happens even today, I mean, here at Radhakund also, um, so somehow they end up criticizing Prabhupada. Not just they, even in fact, I met few devotees who were with ISKCON earlier, and then they left movement for whatever reason, and then joined some other Guruji in Gaudiya Math, and while speaking with me, they were criticizing Prabhupada. I said, first, just write one page. Prabhupada has written so many books. You just write one page of philosophy, what he has given. Then we will talk. Otherwise, don't just criticize him, his philosophy or the books that he had given. No. You might not like it, fine. That's up to you. But you cannot criticize. And okay, don't like Prabhupada, what he has written, you following your guru, that's fine, great. Who's stopping you? After the 5-day festival, Prabhupada left Mayapur for Vrindavan, where he planned to hold another groundbreaking ceremony. So Mayapur, Bombay, Vrindavan, all groundbreaking ceremonies in 1972. The Mayapur land was still completely undeveloped, and Prabhupada urged his disciples in India to continue collecting the necessary funds. We're making a very gorgeous plan at Mayapur, and if you all together can give shape to this plan, it will be unique in the whole world. It'll be a world center for teaching spiritual life. Students from all over the world will come, and we shall revolutionize the atheistic and communistic tendencies of rascal philosophers. Yeah, this is also generally the philosophers or the intellectuals, so-called intellectuals, they tend towards atheistic or communistic tendencies. They don't want devotional tendency. Somehow it's a common theme. Maybe so if they are very intelligent, they've learned a lot, they've studied a lot. So first thing is forget about God. We don't need God. Who's God? No. The point of knowledge is one should learn about God. That's the whole thing about knowledge. And one should be grateful to whatever he has, because ultimately God gives the intelligence. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, intelligence, forgiveness, remembrance, all comes from me. But this is what they don't want to admit. So we must be responsible for this great task. Not for a single moment shall we be without ISKCON thoughts. This is my request to you all. February 1972. During Prabhupada's absence from Vrindavan, the devotees had been unable to persuade Mr. S to grant legal permission for ISKCON to use the land. Prabhupada had insistently directed one of his Indian-born disciples, Kshirodakshay, to acquire from Mr. S an actual deed. Kshirodakshay had pleaded with Mr. S, and seeing Mr. S's indecision, he had spoken with Mrs. S, and then with the two of them together. Mr. and Mrs. S had agreed that since they could not decide, they would put the matter before Srimati Radharani herself. Mrs. S had asked Kshirodakshay to take 2 slips of paper and to write yes on one and no on the other. Yes, we have also done that when we were little. When we cannot decide, we just put the 2 slips of paper, fold them, yes and no on each, and then pick one. Okay, that would be the answer. These she folded and placed before the family deity of Radha Krishna. She had then asked Kshirodakshay to pick one of the papers. Kshirodakshay had done so, and in the presence of Mr. and Mrs. S and Radha and Krishna, he had opened the piece of paper on which was written the word yes. When Prabhupada had heard the news, he had been joyous. I'm especially pleased upon you that you have secured the S land for Krishna. Now let us cooperate to build up a wonderful center there in Vrindavan. In March 1972, Prabhupada returned to Vrindavan to sign the deal with Mr. S and to perform the groundbreaking ceremony. With permission from the Goswamis at the Radha Damodar temple, he arranged for quarters for his disciples so they would have a place to reside while the temple at Raman Reti was under construction. Yamuna. It just so happened that on the morning that the Goswamis were to sign an agreement with Prabhupada for use of the rooms at Radha Damodar, the electricity went out. Prabhupada's secretary had only an electric typewriter. So I reminded Prabhupada that I was trained in writing calligraphy. I had my writing pens with me. So immediately Prabhupada drafted the writing that he wanted. And I took it into another room, sat down and hand-lettered a contract with gold embossing on all the capitals. Within 15 minutes, we presented it to Srila Prabhupada. So that's also one of the skills somehow Yamuna Mataji had. Before the Goswamis, Prabhupada held up the document with pleasure and said, just see, my disciples are expert in everything. Now the devotees would be allowed to reside above his rooms at Radha Damodar temple, and they would also have access to his rooms for cleaning. Prabhupada felt it was a grand occasion that there was something in writing for the preservation of his rooms in the Radha Damodar temple. To close the transaction for the land in Raman Reti, Prabhupada and Mr. S met at Magistrates Court in Mathura. In the presence of lawyers, they completed the formalities. Prabhupada saw it as Krishna's grace that he had acquired a good plot of land in Vrindavan. And writing to his GBC secretaries in America, he asked them to send as many men as possible to help in the new project. He described his intentions for raising up a very excellent center to revive the spiritual life for Vrindavan on behalf of Rupa and Jiva Goswamis. So yes, it is still a very big piece of land that ISKCON got in Vrindavan. And yes, at that time it was in the outskirts, but now it's pretty much in the middle of the city. Prabhupada told Kshirodaksha, I warned on this occasion, huge prasadam should be prepared and every man in Vrindavan should be invited and take prasadam. 2 days later, with 100 people attending, Prabhupada held the cornerstone laying ceremony at Raman Reti. Again, he descended into the ceremonial pit and placed the deity of Ananta, on whose head the temple would rest. But late that night, the land was attacked. An elderly Indian widow with local fame as a sadhu became angry that Mr. S had not given her the land, which she had several times requested. During the night, she sent gundas to dismantle the brick foundation of the ceremonial cornerstone and to desecrate the pit, which had just that day been filled with flowers and religious objects. The gundas dug open the hole, threw garbage into it, and stole the posted sign announcing the land's new ownership. Prabhupada was in his room at the Radha Damodar temple when he heard what had happened. He became angry and told his disciples to show the deed to the police. That night, several policemen guarded the land, and when the hired gundas came again, the police accosted them and warned them if they caused any more trouble, they would be arrested. And that was the end of it. Yes, Vrindavan, we know it's a spiritual place of Radha and Krishna's pastimes, but these things also happen. And happen a lot. So one has to be very careful when you come to Vrindavan or any place in Braj. One has to be very careful. Prabhupada had several times said that by becoming a devotee, one gains many enemies. The incident also served to confirm Prabhupada's conviction that ISKCON's taking possession of the land should be followed as quickly as possible by construction of a temple. They should at least encircle the land with a fence, build small huts, and live on the land while preparing for temple construction. So that way, somehow in India, that is a rule. You have to take possession, you have to build the fence, and then it is considered, yes, it's your property. Otherwise, anybody can claim. Tejas, this will be Krishna Balram temple, Prabhupada said. We didn't really know what was going on. We all thought it was so far away. It was really the boondocks, Raman Reti. Nobody was out there. It was such an isolated place, and there were lots of dacoits living out there. We thought, if you're going to have a temple out there, no one will ever come. But Prabhupada said, wherever there is Krishna, everyone will come. Prabhupada Secretary Shyam Sundar wrote to Godbrother about the newly acquired Vrindavan property. Earlier in the day, before breakfast, Prabhupada stood up the 4,800 square yard gift plot in Ramanreti, where Krishna used to sport with friends in the forest, about 10 minutes walk from Radha Damodar. Prabhupada surveyed the land with the rope from his mosquito net, bargained for, drew plans for, drew up the deed for, went to Mathura Magistrate's Court for, and signed, sealed, and delivered in an instant. Prabhupada has asked me to request you that at least 50 men from the US must come to India immediately. At last, we have got a solid program in India, huge projects at Mayapur, Vrindavan, and Bombay. All the lands are acquired, arrangements made, and everything by Prabhupada. But only a few of us men are here to struggle with an immense task, the biggest by far within the society, of developing these three places. And believe me, these three projects are more dear to Prabhupada than any yet contemplated. Yes, these three were the biggest, dearest projects. So for Vrindavan, Mayapur, Bombay. For Mayapur, he said, this is my place of residence. Vrindavan is a place of worship. And Bombay is my office. So this is how he told for these three places. In the month while Prabhupada was away from Bombay, he had left on February 10. The payment of 50,000 rupees was duly made. Slowly at first, a few devotees moved to the Juhu land, living in a tent. At night, the rats and mosquitoes would disturb the devotees' sleep. While attempting to clear the overgrown weeds, they came upon empty liquor bottles and overflowing sewage. Without Prabhupada present, their resolution grew weak. But then Brahmananda Swami returned from Calcutta, where he had been with Srila Prabhupada. Brahmananda Swami was inspired, and he gave the Bombay devotees new impetus. They would have to clear the land and raise a pandal right away. Brahmananda Swami had never put on a pandal program before, but he hired a contractor to build several chatai, palm frond houses for the devotees and a festival tent, even before the construction could begin. However, the devotees would have to thoroughly clear the land. Mr. Sethi, a neighbor and life member, hired a work crew to cut down the weeds and vegetation. And several life members and friends in Bombay also came forward to assist. Mr. N offered to help by sending one of his assistants, Mr. Matar, to organize the hired laborers in clearing the fields. The devotees also worked in preparation for Prabhupada's return. So this Mr. Sethi, Mr. P.L. Sethi, his name was. He was from Chandigarh, but he was now he was living in Mumbai and he was doing construction work. He was a contractor. And he served amazingly for this Juhu temple project. And Mr. N, we'll read further what happens. But Mr. Sethi, remember this, he did wonderful service. Shri Radha Ras Bihari arrived at Hare Krishna land in a taxi, riding across the laps of several devotees. They had moved before, and this time their residence was a tent. They had first come to be with the devotees of Bombay during the Pandal program at Cross Maidan in downtown Bombay. On that occasion, there had been a procession to Chapati beach, and when the devotees had arrived, Radha Ras Bihari, beautifully dressed, decorated, and installed in an ornate palanquin, had been awaiting them. Krishna was white marble and held a silver flute. Radharani's right hand, palm forward, extended a benediction. They were beautiful. And yes, they are beautiful deities. After their first appearance at Chapati, Radha Ras Bihari had moved to the Akash Ganga building, where gradually the devotees had established a decent standard of deity worship. When Prabhupada had left orders that Radha Ras Bihari should move to Juhu as soon as the down payment was made, some of the devotees had questioned, why should the deities move before the facilities were proper? Shouldn't they wait until the temple was built? Once the deity is installed on a piece of property, Prabhupada had replied, no one will remove them. These are judicial issues and practical issues in India. But once the deities are installed, nobody removes them. So that is why Prabhupada was hurrying them. Install the deities, even if the facilities are not there. More than anyone else, Prabhupada was aware of the proper worship to be offered to Radha Ras Vihari. But his emphasis was now on securing the land. How else, he reasoned, could he eventually give Radha Ras Vihari a royal throne and temple unless they themselves first established their right of proprietorship by taking up residence at Hare Krishna land? The arrival of Radha Ras Vihari at Juhu also meant increased difficulties for the devotees, who now had to struggle to maintain the morning puja and cook 6 daily offerings in the meager kitchen. Even Radha Ras Vihari's tent was insubstantial and swayed in the wind. See, even Radha and Krishna, they tolerated all these inconveniences just to let Prabhupada and other disciples and his devotees serve them, take care of them. It's inconvenience for the deities also. It's not that they like it, but because it's Prabhupada doing and they love the devotion of Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada, however, saw the move as a necessary transcendental tactic. He felt certain that everyone involved, himself, the owners of the land, the Bombay municipality, would accept that the land belonged to Krishna, since Krishna was already residing there. And because he was asking Lord Krishna himself to accept these inconveniences, he prayed to the deity, my dear sir, please remain here, and I shall build a beautiful temple for you. Amazing commitment. By the time Prabhupada returned to Bombay, Radha Ras Vihari were installed on the stage of the festival pandal. Attendance at the festival was not as great as it would have been in the downtown Bombay. No more than 500 people came a night, but Prabhupada was satisfied. This festival was on their own property, and this was only the beginning. Every evening, Prabhupada lectured at the pandal and attended the kirtan and aarti before Radha Ras Vihari. Panch Dravid Swami had collected donations for 5 tons of dal, rice and flour, and the devotees were regularly cooking enough khichdi to serve 125 people free prasadam daily. In the evening, Prabhupada himself would give out halwa from the deity's plate, and the crowd, including well-to-do businessmen and their wives, would press forward to receive the prasadam. Prabhupada liked the festival so much that he told the devotees to arrange to keep the tent for a perpetual festival. Perpetual festival, it should go on forever. Prabhupada lived on the land in a tent, just like the other devotees, until Mr. Acharya, one of the more favorable tenants, living in the back of the property, invited him to stay at his home. Within a few days of his arrival at Juhu, Prabhupada was ready to hold the groundbreaking and cornerstone laying ceremony, another tactic for securing possession of the land. But it was more than a tactic, as he wanted a temple constructed as soon as possible. Radha Ras Vihari should not remain standing in a tent, but should be protected by a silver and teakwood sinhasan on a marble altar. They should be surrounded by deities of the 2 gopis, Lalita and Vishaka. And their temple should have marble domes more than 100 feet high. Thousands should come daily for darshan and prasad. So this was his vision. One morning in the midst of the festival activities, the devotees of the Hare Krishna land joined Prabhupada in a simple cornerstone laying ceremony. They had dug a deep ceremonial pit and surrounded it with bricks. Prabhupada descended and placed the deity of Shesha. Then, sitting on a simple platform, Prabhupada accompanied the kirtan by playing a brass gong. While one by one the devotees came before him and threw dirt into the pit, filling it, while smoke rose from the sacrificial fire. So, ceremony for the cornerstone laying and other things are going on in Bombay also now. So just in 1972, all these three major projects, they were initiated by Prabhupada. Anyway, we can stop here, see tomorrow what happens further. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, you all have safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Hare